chapter 4 in the textbook today, Ehrman talks about how Christianity spread in the first century. How did Christianity spread? Tell me a little bit about what he says there. Jen?
That when there was a few followers of Jesus, and when he was persecuted, they proceeded to spread out to different parts of the world and were teaching the story.
Right? It spread by word of mouth. So that if Jen's part of the Jesus movement, after he's died and you believe that he rose from the dead and met some people in the community, and let's say you move from Jerusalem to Rome, you start telling people in Rome about your experiences and how you're a follower of Jesus, right? This is how the tale spread. People would spread it by word of mouth about who they were following, why they were following him, etc. They did not have a Bible, right? So that, Jen, it's only the year 35. You don't have a Bible to take with you when you move to Rome, do you? Because it won't be formed as a canon until what century?
Third or fourth?
Fourth and fifth century. This won't be formed as a Bible until the 4th or 5th century. Like 400 years later. For now, all Jen has are the stories that she remembers. The gospel stories were passed along by word of mouth. What was the earliest, of the gospels in the Bible, which one's the earliest? Mark is the earliest, and it was probably written around when? Yeah, probably around 70 CE, which would be about 40 years after Jesus died. Right? There's a 40-year gap between when Jesus died and when this first gospel is written. Now that doesn't mean that nothing was written down in the interim. So their scholars speculate that Mark had some written sources that he incorporated, like he had some writings about what Jesus said that he used, and etc. So it doesn't mean nothing was written down, but what we have here was first written, the Gospels anyway, around 70. There's a big gap between when Jesus died and Jen starts going around telling stories about Jesus to when there's something actually written down. Now, based on the evidence, can we say that people were intent on keeping the stories purely historically accurate and unchanging? I mean, what does the evidence show us?
They changed a lot.
They've been changed a lot. Now, what are some of the motivations why people would change? We know some of the changes were probably accidental, but some of them were motivated. What might motivate one to change?
If something is like a popular word of mouth story, you might add it in.
Maybe something is popular that you like, part of the story that you like, and it's not in the text that you're copying, so you add it in. What other things might motivate one to make a change in the text? Dana?
What they thought was important, they would want to emphasize a certain.
Yeah, maybe there's something that you think needs to be in there that's not, so you add it in because it's important to you. What else? Yeah.
Like if they thought it contradicted, it was contradicting, then they would make it so that, it's all the same.
If you saw something, you're like, oh, it looks like it might be contradictory, so you correct it so it does not appear contradictory to you. Of course, if we were reading the same text, we might not all agree that it's a contradiction, but if you think it looks like a contradiction, you might change it to look that way, to make it look right. Right? There are lots of motivations why somebody might have changed. And were they changing it? Yeah. They were. No, I don't want to say they were all changing it. A lot of them were changing it because that's how we have all these different copies. When these traditions were handed down, fidelity or faithfulness to the tradition itself was not primary. People were more interested in what was important to them, or the stories that they had heard that were popular, etc. Being faithful to the actual story that you had inherited, or the text that you inherited, was not primary. It does not appear to have been primary. Pull out the reading from Misquoting Jesus. And look at page 53. Page 53.
This one?
It's Misquoting Jesus. It's the one in your right hand. I want to look at the paragraph, the quotation in the middle of the page, which is written by Irenaeus, one of the church fathers, one of the major players in the formation of the church in the 2nd century. Irenaeus says, "When my fellow Christians invited me to write letters to them, I did so. These devil's apostles have filled with cares, taking away some things and adding others." He's talking about these people that he doesn't like, who are adding to and changing the scriptures. For them, the woe is reserved, meaning they're going to have bad luck because of this. Bad things are going to happen to them because they've changed it. Small wonder then if some have dared to tamper even with the word of the Lord himself, when they have conspired to mutilate my own humble efforts. So it's like, even these letters that I've written, they've changed them to make me look bad. Big surprise that they're doing the exact same thing to the Bible text, right? They're changing my words, they're changing the words in the Bible to make it say what they want them to say. He's complaining about this, right? The idea that fidelity to the text is not primary for them, so it must be primary for Irenaeus and his group, right? If he's criticizing the others for changing the text, that must mean that his group was not changing the text, right? Well, Ehrman points out that Irenaeus' group was changing the text just as much. So look on. Charges of this kind against heretics, this is the group that Irenaeus is attacking. Charges that they altered the text of Scripture to make them say what they wanted them to mean are very common among early Christian writers like Irenaeus. These early Christians are complaining that other people are changing the text. What is noteworthy, however, is that recent studies have shown that the evidence of our surviving manuscripts points the finger in the opposite direction. Scribes who were associated with the Orthodox tradition, those guys who were in Irenaeus' group, not infrequently changed their texts, sometimes in order to eliminate the possibility of their misuse by Christians affirming heretical beliefs, and sometimes blah, blah, blah. Ehrman's point is that some people would complain about this. Oh, like, let's pretend that we've got two teams. Dana, you're on one side, I'm with you. We're in Irenaeus' group, and Anthony over there, he's in the heretical group. Can you believe that? That jerk is changing the Bible. Anthony, how dare you? You're tampering with my words, you're tampering with the Bible. Ehrman looks up the details, and he's like, oh my gosh, well, it looks like Dana and Craig were changing their stuff too. We're complaining that there's not fidelity to the tradition, but it turns out we're not faithful to the tradition either. Now, Irenaeus himself may have been, but the group that he was affiliated with was not in general. The Orthodox Christians were changing the text, and we have proof that they were changing the text. This tells us that being faithful to the tradition was not primary.